Now, still looking at the series of May-June 2025 and the kind of concept that really featured in that paper. One of the concepts that features from question 5 was magnetism. And so students were supposed to understand the law of magnetism. They were supposed to understand what it means by magnetic fields, because at one point the students were supposed to define what magnetic fields are, and also students were supposed to differentiate between magnetic fields and non-magnetic fields. So from the law of magnetism, we understand that it says that unlike poles attract, like poles repel. So which means that if you are going to bring a north and a south, whatever you have there is unlike poles. So which means the field will be originated from the north pole into the south pole. So that is also one of the properties of magnetic fields. Magnetic fields or a magnetic field is a region where a magnetic region where is a region around a magnet where the magnetic force can be detected or can be experienced, and these magnetic fields are represented by lines. So what you need to understand is that this line originates from the north pole and they enter into the south pole. So the arrows should be pointing from the north to the south. So if you are given a scenario whereby you have the arrows pointing downward like that, it will mean this must be a north pole, and whatever pole that is down here is a south pole. And also in this case here, the field will point that way. Yeah. So in igcse physics, you may be given a diagram and you complete the magnetic fields. So you have to check whether you are having the like poles or unlike poles. So for in this case, where you have straight fields, it means those are uniform magnetic fields. And another property of magnetic field you need to remember when you are doing igcse physics is that when the fields are very close, it means these magnetic fields, these are strong magnetic fields. Then if you have different poles, you can see now you have similar poles. These fields are going to repel each other. Yeah, they are going to repel each other, but the arrow should be pointing away from the north. Yeah, take note of that, the fields, and then we shall have a region here which is a neutral region where there is no effect of that magnetic field. So you need to understand also magnetic fields and non-magnetic magnetic materials and non-magnetic materials. So whereby you have to know the definition of magnetic materials, and then you must be able to give an example of each of the materials that you have stated. So steel is a magnetic material because it can be attracted by a magnet. Iron is a magnetic material because it can be attracted by a magnet. Then when we are talking about non-magnetic materials, are materials which cannot be attracted by a magnet. And we can give a number of examples. Examples here include glass. We have plastic. We can talk of wood and many others. So once you have understood that, you also need to understand what we mean by hard magnetic materials, hard and soft magnetic materials. So when we are talking about hard magnetic materials, these are materials which are difficult to magnetize, but once magnetized, they retain the magnetism for a long period of time. And an example of that is steel, which is used to make a permanent magnet. But when we are talking about soft magnetic materials, those materials which are easily magnetized, but they lose their magnetism quite easily. And we can talk of iron in this case. And where is it used? It's used to make temporary magnets, such as electromagnet. So we realize that we are going to use iron to make an electromagnet, with the reason that it can be easily magnetized, and at the same time it can be able to lose that magnetism quite easily. So that's the reason behind why it's used like that. So when we are looking at the exam of 2025, what were the questions that featured in that particular exam of June 2025? So what was supposed to be done in that particular question? So the kind of question that was asked here, there was a person who was cleaning a window. That was a window cleaner. And in the first part of the question, the student was supposed to complete, and then you could be able to state the difference between magnetic and non-magnetic materials. So that was part A, difference between magnetic and non-magnetic materials. So you can see we have identified here, and we have given the definition that the student was supposed to say magnetic materials are materials which are attracted by magnets, whereas non-magnetic materials are materials which cannot be attracted by a magnet. Suggest a suitable material for the magnets in the window cleaner and explain your answer. Why? Steel should be used because in this particular question, the window cleaner contains two magnets. Yeah, and this has to be permanent magnets, right? So the window cleaner be made of steel because reason, it's magnetic, yeah, and also it can be able to retain the magnetism for a long period of time. Yeah, so the reason as to why I'm taking through this in details, because you are not going to, ideally you are not going to be asked these questions, because already these questions have been asked. So you need to understand the logic behind how questions are answered, so that anytime you're going to be asked a question from any of these areas, you'll be in a position to answer such kind of questions. how do fields show? Yeah, so also there was a question on labeling, because there was this section here. Let me just show you. There was this section here, and another section was given here, and there was part of the diagram was having different section like that, and then there were magnetic fields which were like that, and also on the other part of the cleaner there was magnetic fields which were pointing like that. So all cases the fields were pointing that direction. Then the student was supposed to label the poles of the magnet, this part B and this part C. The student was supposed to label the parts of the magnet. So in this case, the examiner was just trying to check whether the student understand that the fields point originate from the North Pole and they end up into the South Pole. So this is also the North Pole, and this becomes the South Pole. So if you are labeling that, so you can be able to say this is the South on this end, and the North will be on this other end here, and then we have the South here, and then we shall have a North on that point. So candidates were supposed to identify that how the field lines show different strengths of the magnetic fields. How field lines show different magnetic fields. Field strength. Yeah, so how do we know where the fields are strong? That's the main question. The closer the fields, because we need to understand when the fields are very close and straight, very close fields, can say the closer the fields, the stronger they are. So if you observe different regions on these magnetic field lines, you notice that there are regions where the fields are close and there are regions where the fields are much far apart. So where the fields are close, it means those fields are stronger in that particular region. Where the fields are apart, like this one here we have weaker field. But for instance, at this particular point here, we have stronger field towards this region. Here we have stronger fields at this particular point, but this part we have the fields quite separated, and that could imply that the fields at that particular point, they are actually weak. So basically that's what we're going to mention on that. We're going to look at other topics which also details that appeared as far as electricity is concerned. See you in the next tutorial. See you in the next video.